You know that feeling, right? That sudden flash of frustration, or maybe it's that resentment that just kind of simmers under the surface. Yeah, that's anger. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? Today, we're gonna grab a shovel, maybe a brush, because we are doing some emotional archaeology. We're gonna find out what our anger is really trying to tell us.
So, let's just get right to it. What is your anger actually trying to tell you? I mean, most of us treat it like static on the radio, right? Something you just want to turn off. But here's the thing, anger isn't just noise. Think of it more like a signal flare, shot up from a really deep part of yourself. The trick is just learning how to read the message.
And that brings us right into our first section. We've really got to flip the script on how we see this whole emotion. Anger is not the enemy. It's a messenger, okay? A loud, maybe frantic messenger who's kicking down your door, but still, a messenger with some pretty vital information for you.
Okay, so first things first, let's get this straight. Anger is a totally normal, even healthy emotion. Seriously, feeling it doesn't make you a bad person, it just makes you, well, human. The real problem is when it spirals out of control, when that chronic, explosive anger is the one driving the bus. That's when it can really wreck our health, our jobs, and the relationships that matter the most.
All right, let's bust a few myths right now, shall we? You know how people say it's healthy to vent and just let it all out? Well, turns out just letting it rip is often like pouring gasoline on a fire. It just makes things worse. And what about the idea that anger earns you respect? Nope, it usually just makes people afraid of you. But the biggest myth of all, that you can't control it, that's just not true. The whole point of managing anger isn't to stuff it down. It's to learn how to express it in a way that actually helps.
Okay, so let's get personal. It's time to talk about your personal anger profile. Because to really get a handle on anger in general, you first have to understand what it looks like for you. What does it feel like in your body? What are the thoughts that pop into your head? Let's figure that out.
So step one is figuring out your triggers. What sets you off? For a lot of us, it's what other people do, or maybe a crummy work environment. Even big changes in your life can do it. But here's a big one you might not think about: broken personal rules. See, we all walk around with this secret rule book in our heads about how things are supposed to be, right? And when somebody breaks one of those rules, boom, instant anger.
And it's always this chain reaction, isn't it? It starts with a thought, something like, "That is so not fair." And then that thought kicks off a physical response. Your heart starts pounding, your shoulders get all tight, and then that feeling fuels what you do next. Maybe you attack, maybe you argue, or maybe you just shut down and walk away. Sound familiar at all?
All right. So we've seen what anger looks like on the surface. Now it's time to grab those tools I mentioned earlier and start digging. This is where we get into the real archaeology of anger. We're going way below that surface level explosion to figure out what's actually happening underneath.
You know, so much of the advice out there is just about managing the explosion itself. But that's kind of like trying to put a lid on a volcano. You're not dealing with the massive pressure building up deep inside. Real change, the kind that actually sticks, comes from understanding the why behind it all.
And to get to that why, we have to look back at our own history. There's this foundational idea in psychology from folks like Freud that our emotional triggers aren't just random. They're shaped over years and years, especially by stuff that happened when we were kids. And that right there, that's our treasure map for this whole dig.
So here it is. This is what the dig site looks like. On the surface, you've got anger. That's the part everybody sees. But if you dig down just a little bit, you almost always find pain. The anger is like a bodyguard protecting that pain. And if you dig even deeper than that, you'll often find fear. Fear of being left alone, fear of not being good enough. And right at the very bottom, the foundation of it all, is often a feeling of not having self-worth.
Look, if you only remember one thing from all of this, let it be this. Your anger is a loud, clear, impossible to miss signal that you are in pain. That's it. It's just a defense mechanism for a much deeper hurt.
Now, figuring out that root cause, that's a game changer. But we also need some practical, in-the-moment tools for when things get heated. So for this next part, let's go ahead and open up our anger management toolkit.
Okay, one of the most powerful tools in here has a super fancy name: cognitive restructuring. But don't let that scare you off. All it really means is changing the way you think. It's about learning to catch those automatic thought patterns that send you straight to anger and then, well, changing them.
So how do you actually do that?
Well, you start by asking yourself some tough questions right in the moment. So when your brain is screaming, "That's not fair," you can push back and ask, "Okay, wait, is it really unfair, or is it just not going the way I wanted?" You can even just yell "stop" inside your own head. And a big one is using I statements. Instead of blaming someone, you say, "I feel frustrated when." See the difference? You're talking about your feeling, not launching an attack. While you're doing that with your mind, you've got to calm your body down too. And these techniques are so simple, but man, they work. Taking a few deep breaths, focusing on what you can see, hear, and touch to ground yourself, stretching out that tension in your neck and shoulders, or honestly, just giving yourself permission to walk away for 5 minutes. It's okay to take a time out. Okay, so once you're a bit calmer, you can switch gears from just reacting to actually solving the problem. Anger can feel so chaotic, right? But this simple 6-step framework brings in some order. You pinpoint the real problem, you brainstorm all the solutions you can think of, good, bad, crazy, whatever, and then you work through them logically until you have a real plan. This is how you go from feeling powerless to feeling like you're in control. So, you've done the hard internal work, you've dug deep, you've got your toolkit ready to go. So what's next? Well, in our last section here, we're going to see how all of this completely transforms your relationships with other people.
And this requires another huge shift in your thinking. When we're angry, what do we want to do? We want to win the argument, right? We want to prove we're right. But that almost never brings you closer to someone. When you start managing your anger, the goal totally changes. It stops being about winning, and it starts being about being understood, and, just as important, about understanding them.
And to build that kind of understanding, you need these 4 things. Empathy, which is really trying to see things from their perspective. Genuineness, just being real and honest about what you're feeling. And acceptance, which means listening without judging. These are literally the building blocks for any healthy relationship.
So, let's talk about what active listening actually looks like in action. It's not just about shutting up while they talk, it's about engaging. You can paraphrase, say something like, "Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is," you can reflect their feeling. "Wow, I can see you are really angry about this." Ask open questions, like, "How did that make you feel?" And you know what? Sometimes the best thing you can do is just be silent for a second to give them the space they need to think.
And in the end, this is why all of this matters so much. Managing our anger isn't just some self-help project. It's about making the connections with the people we love stronger. And honestly, there's a real urgency to this. As the quote says, tomorrow isn't promised to anyone. Today could be the last chance you get to hold someone you love tight. Let's not waste that time on anger that's really just about old pain. Let's use it for connection, for understanding. So I'll just leave you with this one last question to think about. What pain is your anger trying to show you?